No, y'all missed the cloud. Chilling scar, chilling scared. We back with another fucking video. 3 downright disturbing movie theater horror story. Bro, do y'all like these type of videos? Do y'all want me to continue these type of videos, like scary videos, bro? Like are y'all into that? If y'all are, can I get 3 likes? And then it'll show me that y'all are into it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let's get into it. I mean, I like scary stuff. So if y'all don't fuck with it, I'ma still fuck with it. I don't give a fuck. Movie theater horror story. Story number 1.
When I was around the age of 9, every Thursday over the summer months, my grandpa would take me to the movie theater to see whatever new movie was out at the time.
Yeah.
Because we would typically go in the morning to early afternoon, there weren't usually that many other people. In fact, this one time we had the whole theater to ourselves. I remember we picked out 2 seats in one of the back rows, as I guess we saw those as the best seats in the entire theater. I don't exactly remember what movie we were watching. This was a very long time ago. As we continued watching it though, no one else showed up. Typically, you'll get a few late people funneling in shortly after the movie has already started, but this didn't happen. We genuinely had the entire theater to ourselves.
Yeah.
At about the halfway point in the movie, my grandpa had to use the bathroom. Not wanting to interrupt me watching it, he let me stay by myself while he was gone. Around 30 seconds after he left, I could see someone walk into the theater out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to see who it was, as I really didn't think my grandpa would have been that fast. It was a man in probably his early 30s wearing one of the striped employee uniforms. We locked eyes for a few seconds. He then walked over to the emergency exit and propped it open with something, leaving a clear stream of daylight shining in the room. After that, he walked back up towards the main exit of the theater and left. I remember at the time not thinking much about it. I wasn't bothered by it at all, actually. My focus was shifting back towards the movie when the light from the door suddenly grew. I looked back over at it and the door was now wide open. Another man had opened it from the outside. He proceeded to shine a dim flashlight in the theater, looking around. Eventually, it landed on me. He then turned it off and started giving me that finger gesture, indicating me to come to him. Now, again, you have to remember, I was around 9 years old at the time. I did pretty much anything any adult told me to. I had never really been given the talk about not trusting strangers. You have to understand that back then was a much different time. Strangers weren't really made out to be as much of a concern as they are today. So I got up out of my seat and started walking down towards the exit door. The guy introduced himself as John and was really friendly, or at least that's how he was trying to come off as. He then explained how he had just finished up a movie in a different theater and had some leftover candy he didn't finish eating, which he thought he'd offer to me instead of throwing away. My 9-year-old eyes lit up with excitement. I told him I was interested. He then explained to me that all the candy was in his trunk.
Oh no.
He grabbed my hand with a firm grip and started leading me to the only car in this secluded off parking lot we were in that was on the back side of the building. As we got closer, he reached in his pocket and grabbed a set of keys which he used to open the trunk of the car.
And put your ass right in there.
Opened and revealed an assortment of different candy bars. He told me to crawl inside and pick whichever ones I wanted.
Exactly.
But
And your dumb ass went in there.
crawling in, the exit door to the building burst open and my grandpa started aggressively yelling at the guy. This caught me completely off guard. Up until that point, I had never heard my grandpa yell before. In reaction, I backed away from the trunk. The guy then ran over to the driver's side door, got in and floored it onto there with the trunk still open, all in a matter of seconds. I started crying, not realizing at the time what had really just almost occurred. My grandpa, now in a comforting voice, tried to calm me down. Nowadays, I can only imagine the stress he went through when he returned from the bathroom just to see I was no longer there. I would later learn that the only reason he knew where I had gone was because the guy had left the exit door propped open just a crack after luring me outside. My grandpa called the cops shortly after the incident, but the car I was being lured into had no plates on it. On top of that, it was an extremely common car to see on the road at the time. So while he did give a description of it, it was ultimately never found. He of course gave a description of what little he saw of the man too, but he was also never found.
Crazy.
As for the employee that had originally propped open the door from the inside, after further investigation, it turns out that man was never an employee in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, he too was also never found. Fortunately, though,
They
this
was
was
working
a one-off
together.
occurrence. It was never tried on any other children in the building that day, or at any point as far as we were told. I'm actually pretty sure they installed an alarm system for the emergency exits after that day, but I'm not entirely sure, as we've never been back to that movie theater after this.
Crazy. Story number 2.
When I was 16, I got my first job at a local movie theater in my town.
Okay.
At the time I was hired, the place was in desperate need of people who could work closing shifts, which I actually preferred, so it worked out perfectly. The place wasn't that big, and so it was manageable to work the shift by yourself.
How many of y'all work overnight? How many of y'all work overnights? Do y'all like working overnights, or do y'all prefer the day shift? Or do y'all prefer morning, second shift, or overnight? Or overnights? I don't know why, bro, but I always work overnight.
Depending on the day of the week, but typically I'd be scheduled with 1 or 2 other people. It was a Tuesday night, and the last showings were wrapping up. Another kid, Noah, who was around my age, was working with me. We were the only 2 working that night, and were expected to get everything set and ready for the openers the next morning.
That's crazy.
Time went on, and eventually it got to the point where the movies had all been finished up for a while now. I began checking all the theaters to make sure nobody had fallen asleep, which actually happens a lot more frequently than you would think. Now, to manually control the lights in the theaters, we had to go on the opposite side of the building. So, to get it done faster, I would usually just do the checks in the dark, using only the flashlight on my phone for light. I had finished checking all of the theaters but one. I walked in and once again turned on the flashlight on my phone. I'll usually start at the front row and make my way back up. I got down there, but before I started searching, I stopped. I stood completely still for a second.
Why?
I could hear breathing. At first, I thought it was coming from the vents,
Yeah.
but the more I listened, the more I realized that was definitely human breathing. I shot my flashlight up and out towards the row of seats. I didn't see anybody. I could feel my heart sink to my chest. Clearly, someone was deliberately hiding from me. I wanted to call out to them, but I was too scared. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I stood there for a while, completely frozen, just listening. And then decided to play it off like I didn't hear anything. I walked back to the stairs, went up them, and exited the theater. Right when I got out, I sprinted back to the main area. I found Noah at the concession stand and told him what I had just heard. Neither of us wanted to go back there. We both decided to just wait by the front doors. We figured whoever it was would have to leave at some point, so when they did, we'd see them walking out the front door, and then we'd finish closing up. We waited for literally somewhere around an hour. Meanwhile, not a single person walked past us and out those front doors. By this point, we both just wanted to go home. We built up enough courage to search each theater again, but this time we took the time to manually turn on the lights. One by one, we went through the theaters. Nobody. There was literally nothing out of the ordinary. I thought it was possible they had left through one of the emergency exits, as some moviegoers will do that for one reason or another. So, as we were checking the theaters, I also checked all of the exits, but none of them had been used. I could tell because there was about an inch of snow on the ground at the time, and there were no footprints leading away from any of the exits. No one had opened those doors. I was sure of it. Noah began to question my story, and I'll be honest, I even began to question it. He ended up convincing me that I must have just been hearing things, or maybe the speakers were malfunctioning for a short period of time. I accepted this reasoning, and so we closed up and both went home. Fast forward to the next day, and just like the night before, I was again scheduled for a closing shift with Noah. Now, as closers, we had to vacuum the hallways before we could leave. I usually tried to do this much earlier in my shift, but this night I was too busy to get to it until later. Anyway, I was vacuuming when it started making these weird noises, and I noticed it was no longer picking up most of the spilled popcorn on the ground. The vacuum was pretty cheap, so this didn't exactly surprise me.
Okay.
Plus, we had a spare in one of the back closets that I knew I could use. I went up front to get the keys and began walking over to the closet. As I was doing so, it hit me that I had never actually been in most of the closets back here.
Oh,
In my
shit.
training, I wasn't told much more about them, other than that there was a backup vacuum in one of them that I could use if I needed it. I got to the door and put the key in to unlock it, but I was surprised to find it was already unlocked. I then opened the door and shuffled my hand around on the side of the wall feeling for a light switch. But I stopped myself. This huge, unbearable wave of stench smacked me in the face. I took a couple steps back just so that I could breathe fresh air again. That's when, from in the back of the closet, I could hear moving.
Oh, hell no.
It sounded like something was rustling around back there. I closed the door and this time locked it. The next few minutes consisted of me running around the building looking for Noah. When I found him, I told him about the closet. His facial expression immediately changed. Dude, you don't think that has something to do with yesterday, do you? Up until that moment, I had completely forgotten about yesterday. The thought of the two occurrences being linked didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah?
I think we should call the cops. I agreed. We sat outside as we waited for them. When they arrived, I told them about the night before and now this night. We then gave them the keys to the closet and directions on how to get there. We again proceeded to wait outside. 10 minutes passed, when all of a sudden at least 5 other cop cars sped into the parking lot. One of them began questioning us, while the rest of them ran inside. At one point, he asked us for our manager's phone number. They ended up calling him, asking him to show up. Now, by this point, we still didn't even know what the cops had found, and honestly, neither of us really wanted to know. But it wasn't long before we would find out. The cops came out of the front doors with a deranged-looking woman. From what I've been told, when the cops opened the closet door, they were immediately met by this woman holding a knife. She jumped at them, but was ultimately overpowered by the officers. She would be detained, and in the process, police would find 2 decaying dead bodies, a man and a woman, stuffed in the back corner of the closet.
No.
That's as much as we were informed of. At that point, our manager had shown up, and we were told that we could leave, which I gladly did. I quit that job the very next day, which
Oh,
my manager was
definitely.
completely understanding of. Thinking back on this situation makes me sick to my stomach. As for Noah, I'm not really sure. I never talked to him after that night.
That boy was a work associate, not his true friend.
This happened back when I was in high school. My friends and I used to always love going to our local movie theater that was situated inside of our town's shopping mall. Typically, we'd go in big groups, but this time it was only my friend Avery and I. We picked a late showing of some weird movie that I can't remember the name of.
Of course
For
not.
whatever reason, this theater stayed open really late into the night. I don't know why, as it didn't get much, if any, business past, say, 11 o'clock. Well, other than ours, of course, as we'd always pick the latest showings. As I expected, when we arrived, there was no one else in the theater. We picked out 2 seats in one of the front rows, and after the previews, started watching the movie.
I always pick the
Something I
back.
probably should have mentioned is, before
I
we
wanna-
walked
I
into
wanna
the
see
theater,
everything.
I bought one of those large soda fountain drinks. I really shouldn't have done this, though. It wasn't even a quarter way through the movie when I really had to use the bathroom. I told Avery and got up to go do so. I got to the bathrooms and opened the door. Now, these bathrooms were ones that didn't have automatic lights. You had to physically turn on and off the light switch yourself.
That's crazy.
The lights were off, so I was surprised to see someone inside when I walked in.
Oh,
It was a man. I couldn't tell you how old he was. He was just standing sort of next to the sinks, in what was only a second ago the complete dark. We made short eye contact for a second before I went to go do my business.
if he's standing in the dark and absolutely doing nothing, it's just either you finna get R word or unalive.
I got done and went to go wash my hands. The guy was still standing there in the same position. I started walking out, and
Waiting
the guy
for
did the
somebody.
same. I
Waiting for
started walking
somebody.
back to the theater, and again, he did the same. He followed me inside and watched me sit down next to Avery.
Yep.
He stood there for a few minutes before walking to our same row and sitting down literally one seat away from us.
Yep.
As in, there was only one seat that separated me and this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this was a theater that was completely empty. He could have chosen anywhere else to sit. During one of the louder scenes of the movie, Avery asked me in a whisper if I knew the guy. I told her about the bathrooms, and she agreed it was weird, especially considering the guy wasn't even here to watch the first part of the movie. But we both decided to just stick it out for the rest of it. As the movie continued, things got a little weirder. The guy kept looking over at us every few minutes. Like, even just from the corner of my eye, I could clearly tell he was doing it. In no way was he trying to be discreet about it. Finally, the end credits started.
That's why you always gotta
Avery
keep
and I both
something
got
on
up
you,
right
bro.
away and started walking towards the exit. But as we should have expected by now, so did the guy. He was practically speed walking just to keep up with us. We got in the halls and they were completely empty. I didn't even see any employees, so we just walked as fast as we could out of the door and towards our car in the parking lot. We got to our car, and as we were backing up, we saw the man get in a blue Dodge Charger. I sped out of the parking lot and drove towards the nearest main street. I told Avery to keep a lookout to see if he was following us, but he was already gone. As far as we could see, there was no one else out on the road but us. A wave of relief hit us.
Nope.
We started talking about how scary that was. Like, that guy was clearly following us.
Yep. And he right
he
behind y'all
obviously wasn't
too.
there to watch the movie. I mean, he missed the whole first part of it. Our thoughts were then interrupted by a car with its brights on that pulled up right behind us at a red light. We both looked back to see if it was the same blue Dodge Charger,
It was.
but we couldn't tell.
It
All
was.
we could see were these blinding headlights. That's when the driver's side door swung open and a man started running full speed towards our car. It was the same guy from before.
Told you, bro.
He started aggressively yanking on our car's door handles until he eventually pulled out a knife and began jabbing at one of the windows. I slammed on the gas, running the red light before he could break it. I turned right onto the next street and started making random turns to lose the guy. Fortunately, this seemed to work. We both sat parked on the side of the road for a few minutes with the car lights off, catching our breath. We
Why would
waited a
y'all
long
park?
time before continuing on towards our houses, and
I mean,
we took
yeah.
side streets the whole way there.
Okay.
We each ended up telling our parents, who collectively decided to report it to the police. During their investigation, police would contact the manager of the movie theater. As it turns out, that movie theater had security cameras, something which I didn't know. But at no point that night was the man seen on any of the cameras.
Ow,
Granted,
bro.
all of the cameras were near the main entrance to the building, but this just means he had to have entered through a fire exit or some other way that wasn't the main entrance. Because of this, he hasn't been identified.
If y'all enjoyed those stories, man, y'all want to listen and want me to react to more stories, give me 3 likes. And I'll do it. Self-love is the best love, man. I'll catch y'all in the next one.